Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete.
Oh, Nikki, our podcast today.
Yay.
Do you feel like, I don't know what you feel like. Like, we've known our guests for so long in so many different contexts.
I know. It's exciting.
I feel like we're just pushing a baby bird out of the nest. So that's what I feel like today.
Little baby.
Go fly, baby bird. This is so awesome. We have so many great things to talk about. So let's get right to it. But before we do that, head over to takecontroladhd.com and get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list, and we'll send you an email each time a new episode is released. Connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And as always, if this show has ever touched you or helped you make a change in your life for the better with ADHD, we invite you to check out our Patreon channel at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. For a few bucks a month, you can join our community, get access to the members-only channels over on our Discord online chat community server, and you can get access to our monthly workshops, our live streams, early access to the podcast. It's, we're trying to invest back in the community, and the more help we get from you, the better. Thank you all for those who have already invested in this show. And thanks to those of you who are still considering. Check it out, patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. HDs and
HD,
ADs.
DD,
They're
whatever.
all there. All of them are there.
That's
to
right.
Learn more. Nikki Kinzer,
Yes.
our guest. She has been a fantastic member of our community since she was a fitness coach. She was an instructor at fitness. We've known her for so long, and then she comes to us and says, "You know what I'm going to do? I think this is awesome. I think I'm going to get into ADHD coaching. I'm going to go." And then she does, and she puts everything into it, and suddenly, boom, she's now an ADHD coach. It's Tara Koch.
And a great one.
We adore Tara Koch, and we are here to talk to Tara about her experience growing up undiagnosed with ADHD, what it means to be missed. And it's kind of a follow-up on our last week's conversation with Dr. Frank, and we're excited to have Tara on the show and talk about her past, present, and future. Tara, welcome to the ADHD podcast.
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Welcome. Yes. Well, we appreciate you sharing your story. This is a little bit different of a podcast that we've had in the past because we really want to have you have an opportunity to share your story because I know there's going to be so many people that are going to relate to it and understand it. And so where do you want to start? Like, where should we begin? On who you are, Tara.
Well, I was born a baby.
Yes.
Let's see. I don't know if you guys have seen Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell, but that's how that movie starts.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to just my environment growing up. I grew up in a town that both of my parents had lived in or were born in, and my family is really big. I had a big supportive extended family. And I went to a small private school, and I had the same classmates from preschool to 8th grade. Like, there started with maybe 30 of us, and by the end, there was about 20 of us. But I knew those kids my whole life. And I think it added a lot of stability. I knew what to expect when it came to social things with the kids in my class because we just grew up together. And even with my teachers, this is something I never appreciated until dealing with it with my girls, where every year it seems like they have new teachers that they might have never heard of before. But I always knew my teachers going into each grade level because there was just a small staff and changes weren't constant. It was like every few years we might have some staff changes, but you would have the same teachers year after year. I actually had one teacher from 4th grade to 8th grade who worked with me every single year. And so she knew all of us, and there wasn't a lot of change in those aspects. Like, even in the middle school years where you start changing classes, we would have the one teacher would be the reading teacher basically for all of our middle school years. And the one teacher would be our social studies teacher for all of the middle school years. So even when things started to change, it was still extremely stable. And so I think that helped a lot that I didn't struggle because there were no surprises. There's nothing to adjust or adapt to. And I was in the talented and gifted program. So my intelligence made it so that procrastinating didn't really matter because it was easy. As soon as I decided to finally get to whatever the work was, I didn't struggle at all. So I didn't learn studying and prioritizing skills at all because I didn't need them. And then when I got older and I needed them, I had no idea where to start.
It sounds like your teachers, they knew you well enough that they realized there was no intervention really ever needed.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think that's part of the struggle is that, my ADHD wasn't negatively affecting me in those years, but I missed out on learning so many of those skills that I would need later on because they didn't come in handy.
Sure. It's like
they weren't necessary
I liken
then.
it myself to like building a brick wall with maybe 65% of the bricks. Like there are just these like massive holes that you don't really notice if the wall still builds. If it's still there. It's just a less functional wall.
Yes, exactly. And then, things were easy basically until they weren't anymore. And I got to that point where my intelligence couldn't make up for my lack of organizing and study skills, like into high school and college, where it just got a lot harder.
So what happened with going to high school? Because I know from talking to you, you moved. And then you went from a very small community of students and teachers to what we would consider like a normal kind of public high school, or what? Yeah. What did that look like?
My freshman year, I went to the local high school in my hometown. And it was like in that period, that first semester, that my dad got a job in South Carolina. So it was actually halfway through my freshman year. So I did have this transition from small public school to small private school to large public high school. And that was a little jarring, but I still had some of my kids that I grew up with at that school. And I was a cheerleader. And so I kind of had that to kind of keep me going. But then when I went from that to the school in South Carolina, it was just a completely different situation because I knew nobody and it was a much, much larger school. It was really like the size of a small college campus. Like there were like multiple buildings and it was really overwhelming. And that was a huge change because I was in a new place with new people and everything at home was different. And it was that's when things started to get really hard because I didn't have any coping mechanisms because I never needed coping mechanisms in the previous situation. So it's like, even though nothing bad was happening then, it's like I missed out on all of those skills. So then when things got harder, I didn't have any of them. So that's one reason I keep an eye on those things with my daughters because they're kind of in that state right now where everything is fine, but I know that there's things that are getting missed because they are smart enough to work around it the way that I was. So I'm hoping I can fill in those gaps for them.
What were some of the things that you noticed that when you did go to the larger high school that you struggled with? What were some of the difficulties?
I know a lot of it was just kind of feeling overwhelmed by how big everything was. And even in high school, I did still do pretty well with the academic portion of it. I was a notorious procrastinator, but I could always manage to eke out at least a B on a essay that I wrote the night before, or, like I was still able to get through it. It was very stressful, but I still managed to perform well in school for the most part. But I think a lot of it was social, dealing with all those social aspects when you're in high school. And it just occurred to me recently that, when I was dealing with a lot of this stuff, I was 14 or 15, but executive function wise, that's so much younger. And so when I really took that into consideration, it's like, no wonder I couldn't cope once I made that big jump because, in the small private school, it was okay for me to be behind because it was such a safe and stable and nurturing environment that it made up for that. But then when you're just kind of thrown into this, it's like the
Big pond,
small
right?
fish in a big pond type thing, it's a lot harder to keep afloat and, figure out what's right, what's wrong, and, dealing with approval and stuff is so different when you go from knowing everyone your whole life to all of these people are new.
Right. You want to fit in and
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and any rejection, RSD becomes magnified by the number of eyeballs you imagine are watching you fail.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh,
as you start feeling the stresses of just that kind of social magnification.
Mm-hmm.
Totally get that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and if you were still able to get your work in, then I can see too where the diagnosis is going to be missed, right? Because we see this as it's so common as a gender bias for sure that if you're not that hyperactive child, boy or girl, or however you identify with, and you're not causing an issue, it's going to be missed, especially if you have good grades. Then they really aren't going to think anything is different, right? Yeah. So,
well, they're not seeing me at home, writing 4-page papers the night
in the middle of the night,
due.
Right?
Yeah,
for sure. So, tell us a little bit more about now looking back, because I know you didn't get diagnosed until you were in your 20s?
It was last year. No, it was last year. So I was 31.
Oh, okay. So it's still a very new diagnosis for you. Okay.
It is.
So you went 31 years.
I have had a depression diagnosis for more than a decade, though. So I've been in the mental health realm for a long time.
Industrial complex.
Right. So looking back, now that you have the diagnosis of ADHD, where do you think it showed it, growing up in high school and college? And I'm just curious what your thoughts are, kind of reflecting back and saying, oh, I wonder if that was ADHD. Oh, maybe that was, or, what your thoughts are on that.
Well, even going back a little bit further, I look at some of my behaviors as a child, and I think I feel like that's very typical of ADHD children. I have a lot of sensory quirks. I could never have like tights or socks that had seams that went across the edges of my toes because it just made my skin crawl. And I always had to have the seam on top of my toes. And my mom loves to tell a story of when I got dressed up for a big family picture for my grandparents' anniversary, and she had little lace gloves on me, and I just stood around the whole day with my hands up next to my face because I didn't know what to do with my hands with these gloves on them.
And everybody's looking at you saying, look, she wants to be a surgeon.
So just like what do I do with these? I don't understand. So I've always had a lot of sensory quirks, which I think can really be tied to ADHD. And some of my study habits in school, I always did my homework on the couch in front of the TV because I couldn't just sit where it was quiet. I would watch my show. The commercials would come on back when we had commercials, and I would do as much work as I could during the commercial. And then it would come on again and I would watch, and it might take me a lot longer, but it was almost like a reverse Pomodoro with the TV show and the commercials where I knew, okay, I got to do this work now. But I learned I had coping strategies. I remember doing social studies homework where we would have to read this long chapter and then answer the questions. And at some point when I realized that I would read the whole thing and then go to the questions and then have to reread it all to find the information, I started to flip that and I started looking at the question and reading until I found the answer. And then just those little things that made it a lot easier that I didn't have to double back constantly. And then I was also a very physically sensory seeking kid too. When I would sit and watch, I wouldn't sit and watch TV. I would be on the floor doing like shoulder stands with my legs up in the air, or just being in all these weird yoga type positions when I didn't even know what yoga was, so that was definitely a big part of it. And even looking into like middle school and high school, I feel like I'm right at that border of kids who went through the phase where they were on the phone nonstop talking to their friends, like before it became just texting and messaging friends. Like,
Right.
I think I'm right on the edge of that generationally. And I can remember talking for hours on the phone and just pacing the entire time. I would go out to my front porch and just nonstop walking because I couldn't sit and talk. There's no way that was going to happen. And I still pace on the phone. It's,
well, that's one of the things
my brain doesn't work.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about when we do our happy hours. Because we'll have happy hours every month with our Supreme Discord members, and Tara has joined us on those for many of them.
Many years.
Yeah, and she's always doing laundry or doing something, and then she'll she'll contribute to the conversation, and then we'll see her little girl come in, and who is adorable, by the way. Yes. But yeah, I love that you're able to know that that's how your brain works and that's how you process things. And one of the things I want to point out with what you said about the reading, the question and then doing the reading, that is such a great strategy that any students out there that are listening to this or parents who have students, tell them about that, because you figured out how to work with your brain without even knowing you had ADHD, right? To make it easier for you. Yeah.
Right. Well, and for me, I think a big part of it is that sometimes if I'm reading something that I'm not actually interested in, the words are just kind of going through me and I'm not really taking any of it in. But when I have that question, I'm searching for that answer and it puts it all into context. So it actually makes more sense while I'm reading it because I know what I'm supposed to be getting from it. Whereas when I was just kind of starting there. And I feel like that's something a lot of people probably do. And I think as someone with ADHD, maybe it just doesn't occur that I could do it that way, that it felt like you read it and then you answer the questions and you should be able to just retain everything you read. But obviously that's not true, even for a lot of neurotypical people, probably, so strategies like that helped a lot over the years.
So earlier you were talking about looking for things in your own girls, like kind of seeing, what gaps you can fill. I'm just curious what that looks like for you as a mother, looking at how, what they're doing and what are you looking for? Just curious what you mean by that.
Okay. So I have 3 school-aged kids right now. My youngest is a toddler, and we would be the perfect case study for a psychologist because I really feel that each of my daughters has a different presentation of ADHD, with my oldest being inattentive, my middle being a combined type, and the third being a hyperactive. And it's funny because with my the inattentive and combined type, they are already struggling. And so I know that I need to get them help. My oldest has trouble focusing in class and retaining the information to do homework and all of those types of things where she always just feels overwhelmed and she can't get started. So for her, it's clear what we need to work on. And then with my combined type, a lot of it is emotional, a lot of growth mindset stuff that we need to work on where she just feels like she can't do it. And if it's hard, then she just doesn't want to do it. She doesn't understand that gap where it feels hard when you're learning and that's normal. She just thinks it's hard, so I'm stupid and can't do it. So with her, it's clear what we need to work on too. It's actually my third daughter who is hyperactive that I'm really watching for the warning signs. And I have been for a few years now because she is an academic rock star and she just is so good at school and she's such a hard worker. And it reminds me a lot of how I was in school where it all just came easily to me. And so there weren't any problems, but she has a lot of impulsivity and a lot of hyperactivity. And I'm worried that it'll be the same thing where she's so good at this stuff and so smart that those other skills like the prioritizing and the organizing are going to be really hard once that content exceeds her natural talents and abilities. Once we get into the middle school and high school years and everything is a little bit more complicated and hormones always have a lot to do with it.
Sure.
But yeah, with her, it's like I'm waiting for that procrastination to start so I can jump in there and say, okay, how can we stop this before it becomes a chronic issue? Because it's like, I almost feel like sometimes when things are really good, that's when your deficits end up being really big in the end, because you don't have to practice those skills throughout your lifetime. It's just a brand new thing that all of a sudden you're experiencing one day. And for me, actually, I feel like it started in like my 8th grade year, because I was in the talented and gifted program. And it had always just been kind of an extra thing that we would do the work in class. We would miss our classwork when we got pulled out and have to make up for it. But for some reason in 8th grade, it ended up being above and beyond what we were normally expected to do, where it's like we would have to make up the work in class and then also have homework from the talented and gifted program. And that's when I really had that first, this is too much, I can't handle this sort of situation. I ended up dropping out of the talented and gifted program because I was like, it's more important to me to keep up with my regular schoolwork than to put all of this effort into just an extra that's not really going to benefit in the long run. So I feel like that was the first like sign of the cracks forming in what had been an otherwise easy school experience.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great reminder for people that are listening that grades are not the end all, right? In fact, you shouldn't even necessarily look at them. I mean, of course you should. That's not what I mean. But you can be a straight A student and still have ADHD and still struggle at home, and the teachers aren't going to pick up on it, which is exactly what happened with my daughter. So I think it's, that just having that message of parents, really paying attention to when their kids are doing their work, how they're doing their work, because that can also definitely give you some clues on what might be going on, right?
I get a lot of pushback with my third daughter, who is the one who is hyperactive and really good at school, anytime I bring up ADHD. And I think it has a lot to do with negative stigma, that they feel like when I say she has ADHD and, can we look out for these signs, they almost get defensive of her because they feel like I'm saying something bad about her. And it's like, no, you can be super smart and super good at school and still have ADHD, but all of her teachers just get really defensive because she's such a lovable kid. She hugs, pre-COVID, she hugs everyone. And they're just like, oh, there's no way. She's just, and then I'll point out, well, doesn't she run out of the line to go hug another teacher across on the other side of the school? Like, doesn't that kind of show her impulsivity that she can't stay there at her age in the line? She just does what she wants right on that spur of the moment. And then they're kind of like, oh, but then they still won't admit.
It is. I had the same exact situation, and where I felt like I had to convince the teacher, like, no, I'm not crazy. Like, what you're seeing is not exactly real, because I think that especially for girls who are people pleasers or who could feel like they're people pleasers, she was really good at pretending like she could pay attention, so she'd be like nodding, like, oh yeah, I getcha. And then she would have no idea what they were talking about, or whatever. So it's,
and that's just, in defense of teachers, at some point, like that is the value, the incredible value. No, you guys, seriously, that is the incredible value of evaluations, 504 IEPs. Those evaluations are multivariate because the teacher does not see everything, but one teacher might not see something that another teacher does see. And so to have that kind of reportage is critically important, particularly because, and I was thinking about something you said earlier that I struggle with, because for me, I'm inattentive and I don't have great experience with the hyperactive stuff. Sometimes I'll have, repetitive movement issues that I have to deal with, but generally I don't relate to it. And so when I have to come and relate to my son, whose diagnosis is combined and does have his hyperactive moments, I really struggle in what to me feels like sort of normative, like neurotypical response. Like, I can't relate to this, what I'm seeing here, as ADHD. Like, is this an energetic kid? Is this ADHD? Is this like a different ADHD that is as yet undiscovered? Because it's so magical to me how this could be the same thing that fits in my lived experience. It's so crazy. And because we're related, it's incredibly frustrating for me not to be able to unlock that, right? So it takes so much more to communicate, to remain centered, to remain present, and not let my own emotions kind of get out of control of just like watching and experiencing those. So stay in line. Those don't get in the grocery cart. Those, you're too big for that.
Right?
And do you brush your teeth? You look like you just ate a caribou. And just like, those kinds of things, like while there's like running in circles. And it's hard.
Well, and I definitely want to add to your point, Pete, that teachers are wonderful. And I don't mean to say that they're not paying attention, because they totally are. And that, I think, is the issue with this type of misdiagnosis, is that it's just so easy to get missed. And that's why, because they are doing great.
And because specifically in many cases, I would say most cases, the teacher is acting in the defense of the child, right?
Right.
No, exactly. I was going to make that point too.
Yes, that is their job, to love these kids, teach these kids, and defend them as best they understand these kids. Again, value of multivariate evaluations.
Mm-hmm. And I have to give kudos to her high school teachers, because now she's in high school and it's online, of course. And she made a comment to one of her teachers around her ADHD, and they didn't know that she had ADHD. So they had contacted me and wanted to know more about her history and what was going on. And it was a wonderful conversation, because now we're all on the same page and they can understand her more. And she's more free to say, I don't think that way. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So yes, please. I don't want anybody to think that I think negatively of teachers, because I love them. They're amazing angels.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny though, because my mom is a teacher, and she is one of the people who, I think even before I had my diagnosis, would say, you really should see something if she might have ADHD, but because she's just different at home and she's different around us. And I think, I feel like one of the things though is that I don't fault teachers for is the societal stigma of what ADHD is, and the misunderstanding that it's only these negative things. And I think that's where it stems from. And there's even healthcare professionals who are supposed to be treating people with ADHD who have those same ideas. So I don't think it's any specific industry or
you're
job.
Absolutely right, Tara. I mean, because the last show, I expressed that her doctors didn't think she had it. So it wasn't until I had to really trust my instinct and keep going further with the testing. Because they didn't either. So it's an issue on all around.
An awareness issue.
An awareness issue. But I am curious, Tara. You said you got diagnosed at 31. So what led to that ADHD diagnosis as an adult?
Well, in high school, after the move, it's fairly typical. I've seen it kind of reflected in some of Ned Hallowell's work and Sari Solden's work, that in high school, a lot of undiagnosed women or girls with ADHD have some sort of mental break at that time. So that happened for me, and I've had a depression diagnosis since then. And then in adulthood, after my third daughter was born, I hadn't been treated for depression in quite a while, and I had really bad postpartum depression at that time. And so then I continued getting treated for depression, and it ended up getting changed to a persistent, or it's dysthymia, which is like persistent depressive disorder. And that's what I had been diagnosed with for a really long time. And I even have a bachelor's in psychology, and I had never even thought for a second about ADHD as a possibility for myself. It wasn't something I had ever thought of in that context. I was actually listening to a podcast, and it was Judge John Hodgman, and they do these things where they kind of basically people send in the little disputes they're having with family members to get solved. And there was one that was kind of, it sounded like ADHD was maybe involved. And the guest at the time was a woman with ADHD who had just been diagnosed a year or two later. And when she shared her thoughts on it, it just was so clear that that's what I was also dealing with.
Really?
Like, it was just in one instant,
Wow.
I was like, oh, wow. It's not that I'm depressed, so I can't do all the things around my house. It's that I don't know how to do all the things around my house. I get overwhelmed and then I get depressed. It's almost always in that order. So that's when I realized that it was the executive function stuff that was really stopping me from being happy. And it wasn't just depression in and of itself. And that's really when I started doing my deep dive. I think I joined the Discord community before I even had an official diagnosis. It was like, I had my appointment to get my diagnosis and I joined Discord because I was 100% sure that I had ADHD. And yeah, it was such a fast experience. It was so obvious. It was, hindsight is 2020 type of thing.
Sure. What made you decide to go into coaching?
About 3 years ago, when my youngest was just born, I finished my bachelor's in psychology, and my plan had always been to go on to get a master's eventually to be either a therapist or a counselor. But because of my own mental health struggles, I've always been worried about it being a little too heavy, helping people with all of their, really difficult problems. So life coach in general has kind of always been in the back of my mind as a future career possibility. So then when I found out that ADHD life coaching was a thing, it just seemed like the absolutely perfect thing. I feel like it's a little bit more in between that therapy, counseling, and and just neurotypical life coaching, because there is that mental health psychology aspect with the ADHD. So I think that is really what drew me in. And it was, just like, this is the perfect thing to do to get a career started. Because now that my youngest is 3, I'm ready to be doing more because I've been a stay-at-home mom and student pretty much my entire adult life with part-time jobs here and there. But yeah, so when I decided it was time to get a career started, it seemed like the perfect fit. And so far, I absolutely love it. So I feel like I've made the right choice.
Oh, I definitely think you have.
What a great time, too. Weird how the pandemic hits as you're making this transition. It feels to me so much like all of these kind of latent behaviors people are discovering about themselves this year. If there is any gift, I know this sounds bizarre. 2020 is just a flaming toilet, but just in general, like what people are able to discover about themselves as they are pushed by, nature and quarantines and general environment, it may lead to a really great awakening for 2021. Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Here's hoping
Yeah.
2020 is the ice cold glass of water to our faces that allows us to wake up and realize, hey, there are people out there like Tara who can help.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need. Good timing.
And Tara, tell the audience what kind of coaching. I mean, I know you do ADHD coaching, but you also specialize in some things too. So tell them that.
I work specifically with women, mostly moms, but you don't have to be a mom to work with me. We usually are working on things that relate to taking care of your house and your personal life, sometimes time management. And a lot of it comes down to confidence and self-esteem and understanding your ADHD. So a lot of it, especially if you're newer to your diagnosis, is just realizing that it's okay to celebrate small successes. And that can help so much in building up and making it easier to do the next thing. So I find that a lot of the people I work with and a lot of moms that I interact with in general, even when we do things well, it's just never quite good enough and we never let ourselves really celebrate. So that's definitely a big thing that I work on with my clients is, just every success counts. It doesn't have to be perfect.
That's right. That's great.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for joining us. I love hearing your story. I hope people can learn a little bit more about you. Where do you want to send them to find you online?
Well, I am on Facebook and on YouTube. at tarajanekoch.com. And then for YouTube, you just add that /YouTube to the end of my website address and it will redirect you. And then I also do have a Facebook group that's specifically to support moms with ADHD. So we can link that too in the description.
And you have a website, right? So people can look at your coaching services and all of that. Right.
Yep.
And we'll have that in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
We so appreciate all of you for downloading and listening to this show. Thank you for your time and your attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute about this conversation, we're always available on the Show Talk channel and our Discord server, so you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer and Tara Koch, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.